Hey guys, this is Rick. I was going to do a market update for this week's video, but something came up that I want to address while it's in fresh memory. And it beautifully deconstructs how the BTC fork of Bitcoin is indulging in narrative control and how it falls apart when you just scratch the surface. After we've looked at this, we will come back to the market update. So let's take one more example of how the BTC fork of Bitcoin community tries to control the narrative in terms of false narratives and how these false narratives come apart if you just scratch the surface of them. As an example of this, I'm going to use a story that was on Reddit, the subreddit /r/Bitcoin. And while this particular story was admittedly on the far side of the solar system, so far out it didn't even reflect any sunlight any longer, it nevertheless illustrates a general point. The story was this. The first fork of Bitcoin is down 90% in BTC value since its inception. Bitcoin is the real Bitcoin. The data backing up this story, which we can see in the far right corner of the story there, in /r/Bitcoin, was this image. And so, the problems with this claim, as written in the story title. First, the claim is materially and categorically wrong. The BCH/BTC rate is not down 90% since its opening. In fact, it looks something like this. It started at about 0.15. The lowest point has been about 0.05. The highest point has been about 0.2, maybe even approaching 0.25. Most of the time it's been around 0.10. And in crypto terms, this is as boring as watching heat-stricken yellowed grass not grow. This is not falling 90%. So the story is materially wrong. There's no interpretation room here. Second, the bad reference is simply incorrect. This story refers to something called the first fork of Bitcoin. And through the image, we realize that this is a reference to Bitcoin Cash, a very roundabout way of avoiding mentioning it by name. But this is incorrect. A fork can either be a code fork, in which case Litecoin was the first fork of Bitcoin, because it was a fork of the Bitcoin client code, starting up a new Bitcoin chain, or it can be a chain fork, in which case there has been many Bitcoin upgrades causing chain forks along the way. Now, Bitcoin Core versus Cash was arguably the first chain split, where the chain forked in two different directions at the same time. But that's not what the story says. Third problem, the chart type for a value is completely wrong. It looks like this, but as we've already seen, a value chart would more look something like this, or if you're financially inclined, it looks like something called candlestick charts that has more of this look to it. And there's some support lines here, which you can generally ignore. And not like this. We see here that Bitcoin's value has apparently been at 100, and it has been down at, doesn't say what scale this is, but 10. It doesn't say what currency it is, whereas Bitcoin Cash has been at mostly 0, peaking at maybe 60, just above 50, and then going down to 0 again, which is obviously incorrect. The chart type is wrong. 4. The chart shows something else entirely, which we've sort of already deduced at this point. Going back to the chart, we see that it says GitHub activity. GitHub activity. this chart doesn't show value at all. It shows changes to code. Claiming that the number of changes to code would somehow reflect the value of the user community and the resulting blockchain is as blatantly incorrect as claiming that changes to a country's code of law would somehow reflect the strength of that nation's economy. As in, the more you change the law, the stronger the economy. No, if anything, the inverse relation is true. Complete opposite is true. 5. The chart actually doesn't compare Bitcoin Cash code to Bitcoin Core code either. The chart compares changes to application code for the BTC fork of Bitcoin's client to the website for Bitcoin Cash and changes to it. This is the amount of changes to the Bitcoin Core client. This is the amount of changes to the Bitcoin Cash website. Promotional material, nothing to do with the protocol. So, on top of everything else, this is comparing apples to oranges. So what? As in, why is this even important? Like, yeah, there's random bullshit posted on the internet. Film at 11, who cares? As in, the internet is full of bullshit. Why is this even a story? I mean, even The Onion has posted stories about this, saying, factual error found on the internet, and making a big story about it, and how people are shocked that something wrong can be on the internet. Well, we know better by now. This story is from 2002, by the way. The Onion was pretty much on the record even then. But the problem isn't that there's some bullshit on the internet. The problem is that in Reddit's BTC fork of Bitcoin community, over 100 people voted up this story as a good one. Over 100 people. We can see again that when I'm looking at this story, it has a score of 62. The score is upvotes minus downvotes. And we can see in the far corner, maybe we can't really see it on camera there, but I can see that it says 57% upvoted. So 62 divided by 0.57 is well over 100 people. If this were just bullshit, it would be downvoted into oblivion. This is just bullshit, so it should have been downvoted into oblivion. But it isn't. And this is why this is such a clear-cut example of narrative control. And all the stories I've seen from the BTC fork of Bitcoin narrative break down once you start just scratching the surface. Like this one. This was a blatant example, but everything I see, once you scratch the surface, it just doesn't hold. It's simply false narratives. Now, I said that this is an example at the far end of the solar system. So far out it doesn't even reflect sunlight anymore. And that's fair, as in this is blatant. But it serves good for illustrative purposes. And what we learned from this is that I want to encourage everybody in the community to question more. Question more. And there are questions that when you ask them in the BTC fork community, you get banned from the entire community. I'm not making this up. And the key point here is that if questions cannot be asked, that's a sign you're not actually challenging the data. You're challenging authority. And authority has no place in cryptocurrency. Authority has no place in cryptocurrency. In the next video, I'm going to try to do a 30,000-foot view of where we stand 1 year, more or less, after the chain split from Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash. And I know I'm being a bit repetitive here, but that's for a reason. In marketing and in any social movements, It is only when you yourself get sick to the core of hearing yourself repeating the same things over and over that they're actually starting to penetrate somebody outside of your particular movement. So the right thing to do here is to keep repeating things. I know it's not fun. I know it can be tiring to hear the same things over and over. But when it comes to key messages like this one, I believe it's necessary. And then after that, I'll come back to a market update and, frankly, where I would like to take the Bitcoin Cash community from there.